Well, I'm really excited to introduce Liz Loza to the Fantasy Sports Pioneer Series. How you doing, Liz?
I'm great, Emil. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast. Got a whole bunch of fun questions, and it's great that we've had this thing called fantasy sports business for a while, several decades, and so now I'm doing some recording and some historical documents, if you will, and I'm excited about doing it.
Well, I love that, and I'm honored that it's called the Pioneer Series. But when are you going to introduce or interview yourself? Because you are a pioneer in history as well.
Yeah, we've all been around a while, but I don't know. Who knows? I'll worry about that later. I want to get everybody else. So you were born in Chicago.
Indeed.
And when did you get into sports when you were young?
So I did do some sports. I was a competitive figure skater, actually, only because I was pigeon-toed, and the orthopedic person or the podiatrist told my mom that if she put me in ballet and ice skating, it would be cheaper than orthotics, which is not true. So, so go pay for the orthotics because I was actually pretty good at figure skating. No one expected I was horrible at ballet. Pretty good at figure skating, and ended up competing and doing that till I was 16. I blew up my ankle when I was 16. And so that was the end of my figure skating career. But I also played on the volleyball team at school.
In high school,
for the most part, in junior high. And then in high school, it was hard with skating and stuff, you know. But I did play volleyball as a kid a lot. But my love of like football and baseball and basketball, the standard three sports of hockey, obviously I was in love with as well because I was at the ice rink all the time. And the hockey players would share ice time with the figure skaters. So I learned hockey at the rink. But my grandfather, so my mom was a single mom. My grandfather was pretty much my primary domestic caregiver, and I'm an only child. So he taught me everything he knew, and he was a World War II vet from the south side of Chicago, very much the embodiment of the Carl Sagan poem, if any of y'all know that, stormy, husky, and brawling. So I basically learned everything that like a boy would learn, how to change a faulty belt in a washing machine, how to know how to change oil in cars before they were all computerized and you could actually change the oil in your car. Stuff like that. And so I learned about football and baseball and basketball. And you grow up in Chicago, that means Bears, Cubs, and lots of Michael Jordan.
Wow. So you went to Brown University in Rhode Island.
I did.
And
which is not at all stormy, husky, or brawling. Not at all the embodiment of a Carl Sagan poem.
So what was your degree in?
I double majored at Brown in theater and anthropological linguistics.
Wow, really? I took one class in anthropological linguistics.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff, yeah.
I love like neuroscience, and I thought about being a doctor for a little bit, but frankly, organic chemistry was really, really difficult. And I found, but the part I loved most about medicine was neurology, and there's this amazing class at Brown. I don't know if it's offered anymore, called Comedy and the Brain, that was like a neurological look as to why certain words like K words, k words are considered funny. They tickle a part of the brain that's attached to one sense of humor. And so I had taken that class as part of my theater degree, and then became really fascinated by neurology and language and the evolution of language and how different dialects evolve and even are created and introduced into a lexicon. So
wow, that's fascinating.
Really, really marketable degrees.
Yeah, I mean, here in New Mexico, we have several different languages historically for hundreds of thousands of years, so it's kind of interesting to see all the different ones.
Yeah.
Navajo is an extremely difficult language. Yeah,
I would imagine. I don't know what that means.
It means good morning.
Oh, good morning to you. But like lots of syntax trees when you're doing linguistics, breaking down the the syntax and like phonology. But I always thought the most fascinating part was the sociology of language, which was how different languages within different cultural subsets evolve and how certain colloquialisms become part of mainstream language, and the cognition of advertising and how you can manipulate language and marketing without even knowing you're being manipulated. I think all that's fascinating.
Sounds like you got a PhD. At least you're very knowledgeable.
No, thankfully I don't, because I don't have the debt that would be associated with that.
So you went to Los Angeles and you got into acting?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that.
Okay, so grew up in Chicago, went to Brown for school. Will say that part of my journey, it's important to acknowledge here, came from my first semester at college. Also, I didn't know anyone at Brown. Like, it was very, very different than my upbringing. I was in some culture shock, and my grandfather, as I mentioned before, was very pivotal in my formative years. He unfortunately passed away during my first semester, and I wasn't able to fly home in time to say goodbye. So it was December. I got home, and I, as a way to grieve, turned on the television and watched the Bears-Vikings game and realized that that wasn't going to cut it. Like, one football game was not even going to make a dent in the amount of grief that I had. So I just started watching every single football game and becoming more than just a Bears fan or an NFC North expert, but sort of became a fan of the league and started to know other players. And that became, after his passing, a tradition every football season. So that obviously comes into play later in my career. But if we then fast forward after graduating from Providence or from from Brown in Rhode Island, moving across the country to Los Angeles, I came to be an actress. I was always very interested in storytelling, which is why I liked the linguistics, right? The language and storytelling. And that's why I liked theater. And at that point in my life, I felt like acting was the best way to be a storyteller. And so I, came here to LA with nothing really, like a couple $100. I got a job waiting tables. I got another job working at a doctor's office, being an office manager. This doctor did laser hair removal and vein removal. And I worked my way up to being the office manager, and he would let me leave for auditions. And then I was waiting tables on the weekends for extra cash and pounding the pavement of being an actress in between. And slowly but surely, I started to book some stuff. I got my SAG card, some credits under my belt. I was on Monk, and I did a couple episodes of 24. Strong Medicine, which was a show on Lifetime, was like my first credit. I did a movie opposite Eddie Murphy. So I started working, but I wasn't I was a working actor, but I by no means was financially secure in Los Angeles or working so regularly. I didn't need a day job after a while, but I also wasn't making any sort of real livable income, especially in LA, which has a pretty high cost of living.
Wow, that's an incredible story. So,
thanks.
Pardon me. Eddie Murphy, that's pretty good. And they were Kiefer Sutherland also. You were in some shows. That's fantastic.
I did 2 episodes of 24 with Kiefer, and he was that was a really fascinating moment because I was only booked on a show to have 2 lines, and none of the other. So the scene it's in the 8th season of the show, and it's when Kiefer's love interest is shot and ultimately killed, and he carries her into the hospital, and she's bleeding out, and it's very dramatic. And I was just supposed to be the nurse that helps her, but none of the surgeon in the quote surgeon, the actor who was set to be the surgeon, couldn't deliver the line and talk. Like, he couldn't walk and talk at the same time. So there's all of this ushering her on a stretcher, and he couldn't do it. And then the other doctor in the scene couldn't do it either. And Kiefer just looked at me and he was like, she's the only competent one on set. And so he gave me all of those lines and then a second episode. So I got this like crazy arc in the final season of the show because I knew how to walk and talk.
Well, that's a great story. Now, Monk, I used to love watching Monk. I'll have to go back and find when you were on it. I don't recall seeing you, but I saw almost all of them.
Well, you can spot me. But yeah, it was Tony Shalhoub was a very wonderful, eccentric, but generous person. That was a great experience. I think I ended up being in a pilot for ABC, and that I thought was going to be my big break. And everybody was very excited. And then ultimately the show did not get picked up. And that was a really, people say thank God for unanswered prayers. I was devastated and I was like, I haven't eaten carbs for years. All of the sacrifices, all of the drinks I've slung and jerks at the restaurant that I put up with for, 15%. And all of it was supposed to be, the ROI on all of that was supposed to occur with this pilot. And it was supposed to be a show on ABC and a sitcom and everything I'd always dreamed about. And it didn't happen. And so I then had been playing fantasy on my own and had won a couple of leagues. And I actually had been playing fantasy. Well, if I go back even further, I was dating this guy and he was playing fantasy. I didn't know what a fantasy football league was. And he asked me one day, we were new in our dating life. And he turned to me, it was a Sunday in September, and said, he was definitely bashful about it and a little embarrassed and said, so I play in this thing called a fantasy league. I have this thing called the Red Zone channel, which I definitely didn't have because I was a broke actress. And do you mind if we sit on the sofa and watch football all day? And I was like, that's what I do. Are we ordering wings or Chinese? Let's go. Yes. So he started asking me throughout the season as we were watching Red Zone every Sunday for my advice on the various players in his fantasy team. And I started giving him some advice and the advice started working out. And then he won the Super Bowl in that league. And he said, I said, I want in. I want my own team. And he was like, well, we can co-manage a team. And I was like, no, I don't co-manage anything. I managed your team to a Super Bowl victory. Give me my own. There happened to be an opening in the league that year, full of dudes. And they said, all right, fine, let her in. And then that next season, I managed my own team to a Super Bowl victory. The guys all balked and said it must be beginner's luck. And then for a third/second, I would say technically a third, but whatever, second year in a row, I won the championship again. And that coincided with my pilot not getting picked up. And so I thought, forget this. I am so heartbroken by the acting industry and by the entertainment business that I'm going to start a blog. I was actually watching Fantasy Football Live on Yahoo, a show that I am a cast member on now. I was watching the show and I turned to this boyfriend and said, I don't understand this. Why aren't there any women on this show? How is this not bigger? How is this the cast? And especially when 42% of the NFL viewing audience is female, I don't understand. And my boyfriend said, I don't know, why don't you start a blog? So I did.
So this boyfriend helped you out a lot moving in that direction.
You could say that he helped me out. I could say that I allowed him to marry me now. So maybe,
all right.
Maybe he's the one who's the ultimate winner.
So that worked out pretty good. So he's your husband.
So far, so good.
So far,
yeah, he's my husband. So far, so good.
Well, that's a great story. Let's see what else I've got here on that. So you did your blog. What was the name of the blog?
TheFantasyFootballGirl.com. Very original.
Yeah, okay. Well, sounds good to me. It works. And you did that for a while, and then go ahead.
No, I did that for a while. And so I was, acting at the same time as I was doing that, but really focusing eventually on putting all of my efforts and taking everything I had learned in the entertainment industry into the blog. So I was doing vlogs or vlogs, which at the time nobody was really doing video. I had a graphic, I had different show concepts and a content schedule. So on Mondays, I did a show called As the League Turns, and I had a little graphic that another out-of-work actor had made for me, which was like a bunch of little footballs going through an hourglass. So it was kind of like the soap, like the highlights of the week, And then on Tuesdays, I wrote an article, and I had another show on Fridays called Secret Weapons, and that was like my sleepers article. And that sleepers was sort of how I built my niche within fantasy, because I was hitting on these under the radar guys on a really regular basis. And that's what I just enjoyed the most. It's still what I enjoy the most, like the Darius Slaytons, like who's going to be that guy? Now the daily fantasy is such a thing. Those players are becoming even more important, right? But I did the blog for a while, incorporating everything that I had learned from a production standpoint within the entertainment industry. And I also said yes to anybody's everything. So if someone asked me to come on their podcast, I said yes, even if it sounded like it was being recorded in an ancient telephone booth at the bottom of the ocean. I said yes. One day, Nando DeFino asked me to come on Sirius XM. I was psyched because holy cow, Sirius XM, that's a really big platform, and I couldn't believe that they would invite me on their show. I did it. I was asked about RG3 at the time, and over under for rushing yards on RG3. I don't remember what the line was or what I answered, but I remember that being a very intense question that I waffled over. And then I got a DM via Twitter from Dr. Roto, Mark Bloom, and he said, I just heard you on Sirius XM. Can I call you? And so I said, sure. And we chatted, and he said, why haven't I heard about you before? And I was like, I don't know. Why haven't you heard about me before? I've been here. So he introduced me to the gentleman at Scout, which was the outlet he was working for at the time. And they offered me a part-time position. And I took it and worked my tail off. That was a very rigorous, it was my first time just doing straight fantasy. I did a little bit of voiceover on the side, keeping my toes still in entertainment because I wasn't fully able to support myself, frankly, just doing fantasy. So I was doing voiceover work at the same time. And my son, I should add, was 13 months old at the time. So looking back, I'm not quite sure how I juggled everything, but I did. And then after that year, Yahoo noticed me, and I'm being really blunt, they poached me away from Scout, and I will have been with my 5-year anniversary is this July with Yahoo. So in July of 2020, I will have been with Yahoo for 5 years.
Congratulations. It's been great.
Thanks.
What an incredible story. Now, so you do the Fantasy Football Live, ironically, that you watched before and now you're on it. And how much is that, once a week, or how does that work? I don't know.
Fantasy Football Live is the award-winning Fantasy Football Live. Yes. Is every Sunday. We record every Sunday 90 minutes before kickoff, and we go live for the entire 90 minutes.
That's fantastic.
So it's from week 1 through week 16.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. You do any preseason? Obviously, you have sleepers and stuff for preseason. Is it content, or is there any of it video content?
Yeah, we do. I mean, I do a bunch of stuff throughout the season. So I just got back from Miami and did the Super Bowl. And at the Super Bowl, there's written content. And Matt Harmon and I do the Yahoo Fantasy Football podcast. So we did one episode live from our stage in Radio Row, and then a bunch of video content interviewing players. I got to talk to Von Miller and Tua Tagovailoa and Russell Wilson, and Scott Pioli and I have done a show together for a while called Cover 3. And then throughout the season, I'm about to gear up for the Combine, and then we'll do the NFL Draft. This summer, I'm excited to announce, I haven't really announced this yet, but I will be going to Tokyo to cover the Summer Olympics.
Oh my God.
For Yahoo. Yeah, so that's a little bit different than what I've normally done. And then I get back from Tokyo in the second week of August, and it's hitting the pavement running into fantasy season. And, that fantasy season is like, I will write, I will do pods, and we will do a bunch of video, whether they're one-off videos or like a National Draft Day activation towards the end of August.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
It's really, sounds like it's fascinating. I was going to ask you, and you answered it already, whether your acting background helped you in fantasy, and sounds like it did an incredible amount, especially how creative you were when you first started doing your blog.
Yeah, I think the benefit of having been in the acting industry was getting on-camera reps and also just understanding how to tell a story, because it's a tricky thing about the fantasy industry because we aren't journalists in the purest sense of being a journalist. Our job is to give advice, and that requires some opinion and editorializing. But at the same time, facts are facts and stats are stats. And so I think the most interesting fantasy analysts aren't just spewing a bunch of data or circling various formations on tape, but they're telling a story with various outcomes. And it is your position as the viewer or the fantasy player to kind of decide which outcome you believe in. I like to say that fantasy is very much choose your own adventure for football fans or sports fans, depending on which fantasy sport you're, into at the moment or what time of year you're playing.
Wow, that's a very interesting perspective. I'm going to have to think about that. It makes a lot of sense. And we also, a lot of times, we talk about when you're trying to give information to the fantasy players, you want to have information and you want to be entertaining in some way. And the story angle sounds kind of interesting in there, somewhere in the middle. Wow, I didn't know all this stuff. This is a great story. Is there something I left out or else you want to talk about? We've got plenty of time.
Something to talk about. Well, I think people often ask, how can I get into the industry? How can I break through? I get asked that a lot. And I have to say, you just have to say yes to a bunch. There's no perfect entry into any creative business. And I think, obviously, you also have to believe that being a fantasy sports expert, analyst, storyteller requires a certain amount of creativity. And not in like a hokey way, like not the fantasy football hot dog or whatever gimmicky thing. I'm not into gimmicks, because I feel like if you are organically interested in something, authentically interested in something, then that will resonate and people will pick up on your passion, and that works every time. But if it is manufactured, people know they're being networked with. That's a saying in the entertainment industry all the time, is that when you go to a mixer, you're being networked with. And nobody who is in a position to help you is just going to help you because you have, asked various questions you've read their wiki page, And so I think just believing more in authenticity and having real relationships. Like, I was talking to Andy Behrens on Twitter well before I ever had an interview for Yahoo, but he tweeted at me and I tweeted back, and not in this weird combative way, not in this like, your picks are trash, Iowa sucks. I feel like that we've become so like, everything's incendiary, right? Like, it's cancel culture, but you can also just develop a rapport with someone if they're your people and grow something organically from there. But it's not going to happen overnight. My journey did not happen overnight. It started, you could even say it started from coming out of the grief of losing the most important parental figure in my life. And this was a weird silver lining that grew out of that.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. I just fabulous story. Sounds like your grandfather was a really important person and did a great job helping you grow up. And
Thanks.
what a story.
His birthday.
Pardon?
His birthday would have been this month, so it's a nice time to remember him because he was born in February in 1918. So, but still.
1918. That's a few years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, the passion's important. I agree with you. It's really people recognize the emotion and the excitement you have with stuff, and this whole advent of video and streaming has just given us a whole, and it's been around a while, but it's become more and more popular in fantasy sports business and whatnot. So that's definitely good for everybody, including yourself, as you do a great job of it. This congratulations on all of your career. I learned a lot about you, and I'll learn about more people as I do more of them, researching and talking to them. But that's a heck of a story, and I'm really proud of you. It's really great what you've done, and it's only just begun to coach.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, we'll see. We'll hope so. I mean, every year, I will say this is another. People also ask me, like, once you get to a place, how do you find new goals? Because you also can't be satisfied. Like, oh, this is what I do. Because if you work in a business like ours that's so seasonal and cyclical, that gets real boring real fast, right? 3 seasons in, if you're already bored of the routine of it, then you're not going to last. So every year I like to set different goals for myself, whether it's, number of social followers or number of rookies I'm going to dig deep on. It can be something completely different. But I also think as I was building my career, the first step was a blog. And then the next year I thought, okay, what can I do to add on this, right? And then it was videos on the blog. It wasn't just writing. And then the year after that, I added a podcast and a Twitter feed. And then the year after that, I just kept trying to think of other things to fold in. And so this year it's the Olympics. That's a new thing. And it's not just fantasy anymore, and it's growing and growing. And so we'll see what the Super Bowl, actually going to a live Super Bowl was brand new for me this year. I'd gone to the Super Bowl week before, but never to the game. I was in the Chiefs locker room after their Super Bowl win. That was a first. So I'm just trying to think of new things every year to build new goals to achieve. And if you don't achieve them, you're still doing pretty good. You're still out there thriving, and you can't measure the lessons you've learned just by your successes. So many lessons learned come in failure. And I'm so grateful in some ways for my failures, because I feel like they have helped me to achieve bigger wins than I would have had I not been challenged.
Those are great points. This is a wonderful interview. I've got to sit and listen to. It's fantastic. Those are great points. A lot of the failures are you get up off, you dust yourself off, and you find a way to keep going. And that's a good part of life. You had a lot of situations there that really put you in a difficult situation, and you overcame them, and overcoming them makes you even more confident and better at what you're doing. That's fantastic.
I think they also provide perspective. And I had an acting teacher years ago who used to talk about people's emotional reservoirs, and the people who had experienced more strife, maybe they were different or difficult, but they were always the better actor because they had experienced an emotion that they could dip back into. They understood how it felt in their body, where it resonated, where it lived. And so I sometimes think about that in our business, in any business really, right? If you're an attorney and you're a personal injury attorney, maybe if you've suffered a personal injury, you might have more empathy for your clients. I just think that, this is a little bit esoteric, so forgive me. And if you want to cut it, I won't be offended at all.
No. Go ahead.
But I feel like we're all so afraid of pain all the time, right? We eat and drink and do drugs and a billion other things to numb ourselves off from the pain, that I think that maybe going back to a linguistics degree and studying neurology, maybe our brain doesn't even know how to process pain anymore. But once your body can live through that, that just makes you so much stronger. It gives you so many more underlying superpowers that you didn't even know existed in your instrument. And so I would just like, we're so afraid of failure and pain, but like, I don't know, you got to go, if you're going to fail big, and then take it back and figure out what you learned. I mean, you started this business with your magazine. I have to imagine that if you looked at the first magazine that you didn't even publish, that you drafted, you could go through it. Okay. Or so then you did it, right? Like you just went for it. That's what I'm talking about. Like you probably redlined the hell out of it and you were like, well, I got a deadline. Let's go. And now, how many years later, you have the most successful magazine in this damn business?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, it's been a lot of work. I'll give you a story. I can probably cut this, but since you brought it up, the first magazine I did was in 1990. I think I started in April and finished it in June, and we put it out. And my dad came over a few weeks later, and he came in the door, and I had one of the magazines. He said, Dad, look what I did. And of course, I was working at Sandia National Labs full time, so I was doing it on vacation and nights, sweat equity. He looked at the magazine. He's a nice man, a wonderful man, love him. Looked at the magazine for a couple seconds, looked up to me, and he said 6 words. How much money did you lose? That was my dad. So I had to live through I had to have my own confidence, which was very difficult in those kind of things. But anyway, I got off the beaten path about myself. We're not supposed to talk about me.
If your dad had said, great job, Emil, this is going to be amazing, would you have worked as hard to show him wrong the next time for the next
magazine? Point. It's an excellent point, and there's one other point I'll make that's very similar to yours is if you've ever crashed and burned, and what I mean is just the world fell off, and you had some experiences like that with your grandfather, going to a new place, new school, your grandfather passes away, etc. If you ever crash and burn and you just don't think you're ever going to come back and you're just decimated and you crawl back over a period of time, those are just lessons that make you a better person if you learn correctly. And I think you gravitate to people who have the same have similar lessons, and when you talk to them you can tell they're not talking about their new car and interrupting you and saying, oh, how great, I've got this and I've got that. They're real people, and you know that person's probably had some tough times in their life and they found a way to get out of them, and they love every day, and they try, and you know every day is a great day, and they know struggles are to come, but they're not afraid of them. They may be a little more careful than they were before. Business wise now I'm getting kind of old, so I don't take as many chances, but those are good things that you pointed out. You got some great stuff. This is fantastic.
Thanks, Emil. I appreciate, chopping it up with you.
Yeah, this is great. So anything else you want to bring up?
No, I mean, follow me on social. That's always nice. You can follow me on Twitter at LizLoza_FF, the same on Instagram at LizLoza_FF. I am excited for the off season. I have been messing around with some amateur mixology. I do not cook. I'm a horrible cook, in fact. Cannot bake. I make chili, and that's pretty much it. But I make a hell of a drink, and I think it was all those years working in the restaurant behind the bar sometimes. I make a heck of a drink, and so I've been inventing. I invented something called the Combine Cooler. Ooh. And just when I get in the lab, if you will, that's a place where I can freeform and mess around. So I'm doing some of that stuff on my Instagram handle at _FF. So some videos about amateur mixology.
That's really good. Well, if anybody's going to the Summer Olympics in Japan, maybe they can come by and say hi to you.
Yes, please do. My goodness, there's so much to do. I mean, there's Mario Kart in the streets. There's Japanese whiskey tasting. There's sushi. There's ramen. There's the Olympics. There's a lot.
My youngest son, his name's Clark. He actually studied for a short bit of time. He went to Japan. He learned the language. Went to Japan to do some school in high school. And what a great opportunity for him. It was a lot of lessons learned, and it's kind of neat. He doesn't know Japanese very much right now, but him and his friends in high school are really studying it. So that was a great experience for him.
That's cool. Did you get to go with him?
No. I just sit behind my computer. I go to my backyard every once in a while. But no, that would have been a good idea. Maybe I should have done that. I got to start getting.
We still got time left. Once you get the magazine out, what are you doing in August? Go.
Websites.
Okay. Fair.
Yeah. Fair. Well, this has been incredible. I've really learned a lot about you. You've had a great career, and congratulations on being the fantasy sports pioneer, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you so much, Emily. I appreciate it.
All right. I'm going to put this together, and you have a great night. Thanks for the time. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Emma. Let me know if you need anything else.
Will do.